YouTube, guess what? Rye Report coming at you live. I am live streaming this right now. We just finished doing some duel rooms. You should definitely check us out, twitch.tv, DLE Yugioh, where if you want to be a part of the video, potentially. Let's talk about the good decks in Duel Links, the best decks in Duel Links post ban list. We've just had a massive, almost 300-person tournament, and we have a lot of data to dissect. I'm going to specifically talk about the tournament. I'll talk about the tier list, and then I'll talk about some other decks that come to mind that you may not see in this video. And before you go angry typing at your keyboard, let me explain myself why I didn't include said decks. So let's get right into it. This is before the ban list. This is before the ban list happened. For everyone that said Salamangreat, I keep seeing it on Reddit and the YouTube comments everywhere. People saying Salamangreats did not deserve to get hit. Incorrect. Salamangreats 100% deserved to be hit. This is how a tournament right before the ban list struck and KC Cup happened. This is what it looked like in the tournament scene. This deck was way too powerful. 107 entries with 249 total players, and this is what the top cut looked like. You can obviously see them. Half the top cut was Salamangreat. It was 100% a tier 0 deck. There is no question about it. All the data matches up. This is how the tournament now looks afterwards. Significantly more healthy in terms of what decks entered. Salamangreat was still the most entered deck, but not nearly as much as it used to be. Much better in terms of health and deck diversity, and this is what the top 32 ended up looking like. As you can see, only one Salamangreat ended up topping, with Burning Abyss, Infernoid, Code Talker, Mech Knights, all these other crazy decks kind of ending up in the top deck. Now, we're going to talk about pretty much all of these decks on here during this video, but I wanted to specifically note first the top 8 decks. We have, I think, 6 unique top 8 decks and a couple of repeating ones, and I kind of wanted to talk about them as we kind of go through the decks and end up talking about what won the tournament. Starting off with Surprise Present Mech Knight. I believe this was first showcased in the KC Cup, and in my personal opinion, I believe this is the most powerful strategy in the current ban list. You can see it wasn't the most top deck, but I think moving forward, now that it's kind of gotten more eyes on it and more people know about it, we're going to see more Mech Knights, and this deck will kind of take over that best deck kind of profile, even though Burning Abyss was the most top deck. This deck's insane. I like it a lot. Actually, it's my favorite variant of the assault mode. Surprise Present lets you give your assault mode to your opponents, which can help you set up your blue sky and get your search, guaranteed your search with blue sky, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Being able to guarantee that search rather than just hopefully my opponent misplays their columns and I can, get something working from there. Also, what's really funny is another deck that's probably a part of the current metagame, Burning Abyss. If you give them one of your spell or trap cards, a lot of their effects get turned off because they technically control a spell or trap card. And even if they don't, making them lose one back row slot can be very powerful against an anti-back row deck because they're not going to be able to activate their assault mode. We literally watched in the tournament someone use Mystical Space Typhoon on the assault mode that they were given because they could not use their Burning Abyss cards, while the Mech Knight still had 2 back row. So overall, I really like the synergy between Surprise Present and the assault mode and being used in this deck. And I truly believe that in terms of weaknesses that this deck has, it's literally you have to draw the out, right? You have to draw your MSC or Cosmic. There's only one deck that comes to mind, Code Talkers, that have the ability to kind of search for a natural way out of this without completely destroying their board state or completely destroying their turn 1 or turn 2. So really good deck. I like it a lot. Moving on. Next up, we have Infernoids. I'll make this bigger for you guys here. Infernoids did very well. Pure Infernoid in the tournament. Being able to use the Void Feast to constantly bring out a whole bunch of monsters, not being once per turn, is actually kind of insane. Having monster negation with the Decatron and being able to search is really strong. This deck feels like it's constantly missing one card before being like this really strong strategy. But definitely with Salamangreats getting nerfed and them kind of exiting the metagame, or so we think, exiting the metagame, they still were able to get one top 8. it'll be interesting to see where this deck goes, because we've seen Infernoid Invoked do really well in Swiss, go undefeated in Swiss, lose the top 32. We've seen Burning Abyss Infernoid not make top 8, but Infernoid made up here on their own. They also made 2 of them. It wasn't just one, it was 2 of them that made top 8. So there's definitely something to this Infernoid build. We have to see if it continues to evolve or if this is the maximum it'll go. But so far, I am liking what I see out of Infernoid, and I'm expecting to see a whole lot more. Just having all those monster effects on demand is really, really, really nice. Mermail, Water, XCs, whatever you want to call it, Shark, is in a really interesting place right now. This deck is extremely hyper consistent, and they are constantly making Abyss Dweller, which is really good in this metagame, and the Crocodile, and have it while having a bunch of cards in hand, being able to use the discard 2 trap and just getting 2 disruptions during their opponent's turn, which in Duel Links, even 1 disruption is kind of nasty. So getting 2 disruptions can end a whole game. This is the one that ended up getting all the way to grand finals of GG Tour. I don't necessarily think Mermail is the best water deck. I think the other water decks still have a chance to compete as well. But this Mermail deck is extremely, extremely cool. The Marine Princess reviving the Croc being used as a link material. The Abyss Dweller. Abyss Dweller is one of the best Xyz monsters, especially being comboed with the Heavy Atlantean, which it's normally not supposed to be comboed with. But thanks to Territory the Sharks, you get a quick play pop. This Abyss Dweller is stronger than other Abyss Dwellers and still shuts a whole bunch of people down. Absolutely amazing deck. Looking forward to see if any of the other water variants are able to kind of get better. Salamangreat still made top 8. Pure Salamangreats, no Mech Knight salads or anything like that. I don't really like mech salads. I think Salamangreat on its own is better, just because locking themselves constantly, it just doesn't really feel like it synergizes very well compared to something like Surprise Present or even like Ancient Gear back row or something like that, right? The thing with Salamangreat is they haven't actually changed any of their strategies. They're not doing something new that they didn't do before. Look at the extra deck. Still playing Abyss Dweller, Roach, Ningirsu, nothing has changed with this deck. The only thing that's realistically changed is they don't have turn 1 Roar anymore. They don't have their crazy oppressive turn 1 Roar. They can't Omni negate you, but everything else has essentially remained the same. You still have crazy recycle with Gazelle. You still have hyper consistency with your Circle. They're just using more needle ceilings now to try and you know, protect their board and blow up your board and try to OTK you. Way more aggressive salads, if you will. Salamangreat, because they lost that turn 1, has lost a lot of power, but is still, I think, relevant enough to the metagame where you have to respect them, just because they just cycle so many resources. And I think once they start actually trying to do something in this deck, instead of depending on their turn 1 and their back row and everything, maybe they try to, you know, use their additional cards for discard cards. We saw Gozu on Friday use Lightning Vortex and Karma Cut in our Friday tournament. Maybe that's something they try to figure out. I don't know. All I know is the original Salamangreat strategy is not one where it's going to keep the deck extremely in the metagame, so I'm interested to see where it goes from here. Still a good deck, not an overpowered deck whatsoever, but still able to top. If you bought salads, you'll easily be able to hit King of Games. I don't think you have anything really to complain about. You're fine. Burning Abyss. What to say about Burning Abyss? Oh, man. Burning Abyss is extreme. It feels like the new king of slow decks, if you will, right? Fire King, Ritual Beast, Crystron. All of these decks are inherently good, but if your opponent doesn't know how to play against it, the deck seems like almost tier 0, right? And that's kind of where I feel Burning Abyss stands right now. Burning Abyss does very well in Swiss. Burning Abyss will almost guarantee you that you get to top 8. But the moment you run into someone who kind of knows how to play around Burning Abyss, especially if Surprise Present takes off and all the Burning Abyss players are going to have to play around the fucking Surprise Present being on their board 24/7, I feel like this deck starts to kind of tamper off. This deck really struggles to get past top 8 and ever really win a tournament in kind of the current metagame that we've had, but it does get to top cut, and unfortunately most of the time I watch it, it's because they misplay into Burning Abyss and they end up losing to it. And that's kind of inherently a not necessarily, I don't want to say a strategy, but it is a strength of a more slower deck, slower control decks, where if your opponent does make a mistake, you're there to punish it, right? Not every deck can do that. If you rock like 6 Samurai, for example, and your opponent makes a mistake, you're not really going to punish it. All you can do is point out the mistake and laugh at them, and then you probably lose, right? Where a deck like Burning Abyss, if you notice a mistake, you're very easily able to get in there and start, you know, dismantling. Mind of the Plana, Farfa Banish is still very, very powerful. You know, being able to search the tour guide for any follow-up is still really, really good. The amount of times we've seen Barber burn for game this meta is absolutely funny, especially with Cosmic Cyclone being unbanned. So it is a powerful deck, but I do feel like it kind of gets signal boosted a little bit when you're playing someone that doesn't know how to play against it, or isn't prepared for it, or is just at a lower skill level than you. It makes the deck kind of feel better than it actually is. It's a technical top deck, but in power-wise, it probably shouldn't be. And there you go. That is all the decks. Let's talk about the rest of the decks that made top 32 real quick. Code Talkers, I feel like Code Talkers are an extremely good deck that just had one bad tournament. Code Talkers are able to set up a whole bunch of negates. They have the cross swipe, which is searchable. They have the Decode Talker, which is a really good Omni negate for your opponent by tributing a card. And they have really good OTK potential. They are a little combo heavy, and of course they did actually get hit by the ban list with alongside with Salamangreat with the Lady Debug getting hit. So they're not like top tier or anything, but they do have a lot of really cool plays they can do, especially if they end up going first, and that's why you ended up seeing so many of them in the top cut here. Just none of them were able to transition into top 8, unfortunately. We'll see if that improves over time. Next up on the list, favorite duel. It's just back row. It just comes up to back row spam. If you're able to get a whole bunch of back row and you know, it's basically Burning Abyss, but all back row instead. And I think I'd rather play Burning Abyss at that point. Favorite duel is whatever. Railway is a super interesting one. Railway being able to OTK extremely well. Of course, having the effect damage as well, just to burn your opponent down to guarantee the OTK eventually. It's super, super cool, but it still feels too bricky. They did buff the skills so you can play things like DD Crow and try to have more into the metagame. I just think it's too bricky to really ever be relevant. I never see them in past like top 32. I don't think there's too much to talk about there. Buster Blader, same thing there. I think this is more of a case of someone getting lucky. Crystron's recently getting unlimited. I feel like Crystron's is also a deck that's still being optimized and relearned a little bit. I think has a potential to actually come back in the metagame. Not right now though. I have not seen anything that makes me go, oh wow, Crystron's are so strong. They're definitely going to be a part of the metagame. But it is cool to see them get unlimited and kind of go back to that C stealth attack Crystron. I prefer other stronger, faster variants of Crystron, but it's cool to see that the deck is back. Banlist definitely helped them. Probably not enough to make them meta. DDD, I think DDD is just too inconsistent. When it pops off hard, but you kind of have to get a god hand. I think as long as there is the skill, as long as the skill is nerfed, I just think that DDD is kind of done for, or just getting, you know, obviously everything unlimited, which isn't going to happen. Destiny Hero, searchable MST, nothing really to talk about there. I think that's just the player playing very well rather than the deck. Galaxy Eyes is a deck that a lot of people still complain about to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, Galaxy Eyes is not a meta deck. It is just a deck that can pop off if they don't run into enough DD Crows. This deck has way too many weaknesses to be considered a tiered deck, and the best part of Galaxy Eyes is being able to use the Galaxy Extra Deck package in other decks, not necessarily just Galaxy Eyes. It's a good ladder deck. It's a good best of one deck. But the moment you start running into DD Crows, the deck just loses. I expect to see a whole bunch in top 32. There was only one. And then they don't really go anywhere from there. Unfortunate. Lunalights. Nothing to say about Lunalights. Again, just protect your tower. That's probably what happened here. Mermail Atlantean. We talked about that already. Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. I feel like Odd Eyes was kind of used as a Salamangreat counter to try to get past Salamangreat, since they didn't really care about Roar too much. And I feel like without that deck in the metagame, at least, you know, at a high enough level, I don't think Galaxy or Odd Eyes is really going to do much. The board that Odd Eyes puts up is just too easy to dismantle, especially with Book of Moon being back, which it 100% is with the lower amount of Salamangreats there are in the top. Even if Salad is part of the metagame, people are going to start side decking it more and more. Odd Eyes just kind of falters in the metagame. Phantom Knights, I feel like Phantom Knights are a really good deck. They're definitely part of the metagame. They're going to be played in every tournament you run into. I do feel like they probably had a bad tournament here because they did win the Friday tournament, so we do have to keep that in mind. But it is kind of on the weaker end of the current metagame. There isn't like a whole lot that Phantom Knight is able to do that other decks can't kind of do better. It just kind of comes down to their back row again, right? And they can play all the good back row because everything's unlimited, and that's super cool to see. I'm glad that's how they do the ban list now, where things are, if they get too weak, they bring them back. But I think definitely Phantom Knight is at the lower end of the pool when it comes to the meta. And then Six Samurai recently unlimited. Super cool that they did that, but I think 6 Sam, even at full power, is just too slow for this metagame. The monsters themselves just aren't that good. And then Shien himself is useless against decks that don't use back row, i.e. Burning Abyss, which is going to be everywhere. So it's cool. I like that they did that, but I don't think it's part of the meta whatsoever. And then, of course, I know people are going to ask, what about Shiranui? Unfortunately, Shiranui is still glitched. We don't know how good Shiranui can be. I think it's probably going to kind of be where Phantom Knight is. It's just going to be Phantom Knight, but with a different flavor. And then it's going to kind of come down to who do we think is better, Phantom Knight or Shiranui. That's my opinion on it. We don't know until we can actually get some data on it and get some games in with Sun Saga not being glitched out. Tier list time. So this is what I think the tier list is. I kind of broke it down in terms of what I think the tier list should kind of reflect. My tier 1 is your deck will have a high percentage of the top 8 and has a high chance to win it all. Tier 2 has a good percentage of top 8 with a decent chance to win it all. And then low top 8 percentage for tier 3, maybe 1 or 2 copies with a chance to win it all, but no one really expects the dub. And then I have good decks, rogue decks, whatever you want to call them, where they might top. They might get top 32, and if they get super lucky, or it's like a really low population tournament or something, they might be able to cuck out a win. Other than that, I don't think they're going to be doing too much. This is kind of my estimated guesstimate tier list. This isn't going to be set in stone. This is what the meta is. If you don't think this, you're stupid or anything like that. This is kind of just what I assume the meta will kind of look like moving forward. And I think it'll be kind of cool to do, like, you know, after every week, after we get a couple more tournaments, see how my opinion of the decks kind of change. This is kind of just how I look into it after a bunch of people look at the GG Tour results. How are they going to play tournaments in the following weeks? That's what I want to look at here. So we've only had 2 tournaments. We've had Mech Knight win 1 and Phantom Knight win 1. So let's talk about it. I think Mech Knight's the only tier 1 deck right now. I do think there's a chance that some other decks, namely either Burning Abyss or Code Talker, squeaks up back into tier 1. I don't think it's like, oh, Mech Knight is just so much stronger than everything else. I just think right now it's the strongest deck while having the least amount of weaknesses. And I think that's kind of why they end up in top cut. And I feel, especially after GG Tour, people are just going to start playing a whole bunch of Mech Knights, and you're going to start seeing a whole bunch of them in top 8. Technically, they had the highest rank amount of top 8s in the GG Tour, but it was only 2 because a bunch of other decks were only 2 copies as well. It was very, very diverse. This meta is extremely diverse, and the lines between the tiers is very, very thin. But I do think moving forward, as the meta kind of settles, Mech Knight will kind of be the king. We'll see if that's what ends up happening. Tier 2, one of these decks is definitely not going to stay in tier 2. This is way too many decks for tier 2. But I think of the ones that right now, I think Infernoid, Code Talker, and Burning Abyss are good tier 2 picks. Out of all these 3 decks, Burning Abyss is probably the best one, especially if Burning Abyss ends up eating Infernoid to play. There's that. We did see Burning Abyss and Infernoid actually lose to pure Infernoid, so keep that in mind. It is what it is. Code Talker, I think, is really, really good. I think I'm going to chalk up their poor GG Tour performance to a bad tournament rather than them being a bad deck moving forward. I think the deck puts up a really strong turn 1, and that really strong turn 1 could give them a really good chance to win more tournaments. And in the Friday tournament, they did very, very well compared to the GG Tour tournament. Tier 3, I've got pretty much all Water and Mermail decks. I kind of just lumped them all together. I think Water is going to... It was already kind of looking good before Salamangreat got nerfed, and I feel like not a lot of people actually played the deck, and it did make finals of GG Tours, so I feel like Water has a really good chance to kind of, you know, optimize, right? We're still optimizing. That's the meme. I think that. Once people try to get back to the drawing board, they'll be able to make something work out of that. Maybe the shark decks or something like that. Phantom Knights, I'm gonna be real, I don't know if Phantom Knights deserves to be on the tier list or not. This is more they won a tournament. I'm giving them their due credit, if you will. If this meta kind of settles, this is probably going to be one of the first decks to kind of fall off. But I have seen some pretty good stuff. The Friday tournament, 2 in the top 8. They still topped the GG Tour tournament. I just think it comes down to back row. If they draw a bunch of back row and are able to go turn 1 and stop your opponent and stun them down, it's very hard to stop them. Everyone in the GG Tour, for whatever reason, played the old skill. No one played the new skill. I want to see them play a mixture of both and kind of keep people on their feet, see where it goes from there. Salamangreat, I think Salamangreat's tier 3. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. Some people say tier 2. Some people may even say tier 1 still. I think Salads are done. I think they're another deck that may potentially get off this tier list. As I talked about earlier, they're not doing anything new. They're just doing what they used to do, but at a weaker level. They have no turn 1. Their turn 1 is Abyss Dweller Pass, Needle Sealing Pass, and all of those are extremely fragile and extremely easy to break through once decks kind of catch on and side decks get better. I just don't think Salads are as good as they used to be. I think they're on their way out of the metagame. Unless someone discovers something new, I don't like what I'm currently seeing out of Salamangreats, and I don't think they'll be a top-tier deck very soon. Good decks, Rogue decks, Galaxy Eyes, Hero, Odd Eyes. You guys know what these decks do. They're extremely old. I just think they're good decks, and with a decent amount of luck, any deck can win in Duel Links. And if any of these 3 decks, you know, don't run into DD Crow, get really good opening hands, whatever the case may be, they might even win a whole tournament. So there you go. That is my opinion on the meta and the tier list. You guys let me know what you think down in the comments down below. What is your personal tier list? Let's compare. Next week, I'll try to make another video, and let's see if any of my opinions change. This is my prediction moving forward. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching. Till next time, peace.